Do you take a lot of running risks? Now, of course I don't mean bad running risks. I don't think you should go from running 30 miles a week to running 80 miles a week. That doesn't sound like a good idea. But there are a lot of risks that you can take in your training that have a lot of upside. And truthfully, breakthroughs only happen when you take big risks. I know for me, in my own training, when I look back over the last 20 years of my competitive career, the big jumps forward in my performances always happened when I took a risk. I had to do something new, I had to do something scary that I had never done before, and usually that led to an enormous breakthrough for myself. Whether that was deciding to try to run at the collegiate level, even though I didn't really think I was talented enough to do so, or really getting into running twice a day as I got ready for my senior year in high school. And then when I was in college, really taking the risk on high mileage, on even doing more injury prevention work in my training so that I could handle that high mileage. No matter when I look in my career, the breakthroughs happened because of a big risk. So that's what I want to talk about in this video today. How to think more productively about the right type of running risks and how to structure those risks so that you can hopefully get the most out of them. So first, let's just define what a running risk could be. Now, you could have racing risks like I'm going to run my first marathon. That's a big challenging goal to have, especially if you've never done a marathon. It's going to, of course, force you to get out there, to do the training that you've never done before, to run a distance that you've never run before. So you can certainly set new race goals, new distances that you've never done before. You might also have new training goals. Training goals might be, I've been a 30 to 40 mile a week runner for 3 years. I'm going to commit to running higher mileage in my next training cycle and really dedicate the next 6 to 12 months with gradually running a lot more than the previous 30 to 40 miles a week that I had always been used to. You could also take other risks like I'm going to start to be the type of runner that does some double sessions, or the type of runner that does a long run every single weekend, or the type of runner that does 2 workouts a week. All of these new training goals make your training more challenging. It's higher mileage, it's more frequent workouts, it's just being more consistent with those elements of your training that make you a better runner. But you could also have new racing goals when it comes to the strategy that you use when you're out there on the race course. So for example, you might be someone who runs very evenly for most of your races. Well, it might be an appropriate risk to take to go out really fast. Put yourself in a position where you could fail, because sometimes you won't, and you'll have a breakthrough instead. Other racing strategies that you might want to try include not just going out really fast, but maybe starting your kick really early. Say in a 5K, you're usually someone who waits until about a quarter mile from the finish line, and that's when you kick it into high gear. But what if you tried a whole different racing approach where instead of a really hard, fast finishing kick a quarter mile out, you started a more gradual, slower grind to the finish from a full mile out from the finish line? That's going to be different. Your body will respond to that in a different way, and I think it is a valuable learning experience. So let's talk about why we don't take these risks, why we don't put ourselves out there in training and racing, when the upside could potentially be huge. I know a lot of runners don't take risks because they're not even sure what risks to take. They're not sure how to increase their mileage. They're not sure what workouts to do, or they're not sure the different types of racing strategies that they could implement in their next time trial or race. So a lot of this has to do with education, with knowledge, with learning more about the sport, learning more about the nuances of the sport so that you can take advantage of them. Sometimes too, runners just aren't sure if a risk is worth it. So for example, you might have heard about some barefoot running. Of course it can be risky from an injury perspective, but how do you incorporate barefoot running into your running program in a way that is going to help you while at the same time presenting you with the least amount of injury risk as possible. So a lot of the times, runners simply aren't sure how to execute on some of these good ideas. And that's what I do for a living. That's what strength running is all about. Telling you how to execute on some of these great ideas. But probably the most common reason why runners don't take action on some of the riskier things that they could do in their training, whether that's a higher workload, more challenging workouts and training, or a riskier race strategy, is that they're just afraid of failure. They're afraid of getting hurt. They're afraid of having a bad race. And this is very common. I've worked with thousands of runners over the last 10 plus years of strength running. And I've learned that a lot of runners are simply a little bit afraid of doing some of those difficult things, like getting their mileage up into the 50s or beyond, or potentially running 2 harder workouts a week, or a long run every single week. And a lot of this fear that runners have is because they don't want to get hurt, or they don't want to do all this extra work and then it amounts to nothing. And so one of my big goals here at Strength Running is, number one, showing you the fundamental, the proven, the tested, and what we understand to work types of training strategies. That's why I always encourage you not to chase after shining red balls, not to get involved in fads or anything like that. Let's stick with what works, because those are the things that are worthy for your time and energy. So how do we take more risks with our running? First, I think it is so critical for us to recognize that failure is just a learning opportunity. If you look back on my running career, I have more failed races than successful races. But a lot of the times, those failed races are so comically bad that I look back on them and laugh. And so even though they were painful and maybe a little embarrassing when they happened, some of my worst racing experiences are now humorous to me. I look back on them and just laugh. But we also have to recognize that sometimes we're gonna fail and learn a lot about ourselves, about what works, about what doesn't work, and what we should double down on. That learning process is really critical to success. Furthermore, look, if we never, take a swing and really try to hit a home run, we're probably never going to hit that home run. I would much rather strike out 9 times but hit a home run than never swing once and never hit a home run. I would rather at least try. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do today. We have to try. We have to get okay with failure. We have to shoot for that higher mileage level. We have to shoot for a more aggressive race strategy. We have to believe in our ability to do these difficult things if we want to achieve our potential. It's also really helpful to simply reframe this whole idea of taking risks. Instead of thinking to ourselves, what if this doesn't work? What if I get hurt? What if I have a bad race? What if I put all this energy into my training and I don't reach my goal on race day and I just fail? Well, what if you succeed? What if you actually succeed? What if that crazy race strategy actually works out? It doesn't have to work every time, but it only has to work once for you to have an incredible performance breakthrough. Those mileage levels that you previously thought you were incapable of doing, well, what if you are capable of doing them? Just imagine. Now all of a sudden you can run higher mileage. After a couple months, you're going to be able to do longer workouts. After a couple months after that, you are going to be a substantially better runner. So let's not think of what can go wrong. Let's instead think of what can go right, because the upside is potentially huge. A lot of this comes down to your confidence. How confident are you in your ability to do something that you've never done before? Now, there's a lot of ways to build self-confidence or your self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to execute on something and get it done. One of, I think, the most valuable strategies is what's called modeling. Really, it's just a fancy sports psychology term of modeling your behavior, your goals, your mindset, and your mental models on other people. on more successful runners, on runners who have it all together, on runners who have done things that you would also like to do. In the world of business, this is very common. You go to conferences and you hear successful CEOs and entrepreneurs talk about their journey. And in running, we should model that same phenomenon. We should look at people who are really good, people who have talent, people who have executed on their talent, and we should learn from what works for them and what works for them at the highest levels too. Because what works at the highest levels is going to provide you with a lot of lessons on how to model your own training. And one of the things that the pros do really well is they surround themselves with people who also think they can be successful. They surround themselves with teammates, with a coach, with a physical therapist, with a sports psychologist, with a whole other team of people, often a chiropractor, often a strength coach. There's so many people that they work with to get them to a peak performance level. They are not lone wolves like a lot of us are. In a recent podcast conversation I had with Michael Crawley, he's written an amazing book called Out of Thin Air about the running culture in Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, things are a little different. If you go running alone, that is seen as a profoundly antisocial behavior because running is a profoundly social behavior. It's something that they always do together. And I think that is really instructive because running is difficult. And when you can do a difficult thing with other people around you, you're going to be more successful. Now, of course, that's difficult in a pandemic because we can't run with others right now. But that doesn't mean we can't surround ourselves with support. That doesn't mean we can't work on our self-confidence, on our belief that we can do hard things. And so taking risks is a lot easier when we provide ourselves the environment in which taking those risks is rewarded. And even if we do fail, the attempt is rewarded. So I want to encourage you today, in our second day of our Mindset Week here on YouTube, to think more productively about taking risks. To think about what risks have high reward that you could engineer taking in a safe manner because the upside is potentially enormous. If you are new to our work here at Strength Running, we help runners devise better training. We help runners stay healthy, race faster, and have better mental models about how to think about running. And if you'd like to develop some of these mental skills that we talked about today, your self-efficacy, your confidence, your belief in your ability to do hard things, check out the link under this video or go to strengthrunning.com/brain so you can know how to train your brain, which I think is just as important as a muscle as your heart, as your lungs, and as every muscle in your legs.